Okay, update on broader markets here on June 10th, Friday night. So, really big bearish follow through today since the last video from last night. So, the video from last night was before the CPI number, which happened this morning at 8:30 a.m. And so we'll start with the daily chart. We'll start with S&P 500. So we knew we had our high on day 14, right? Coming into today. And we knew that Thursday we had that big bearish downside. I mean, you can see just zooming in, we closed on the lows, right? And then today we opened here. I mean, it was a gap down opening and it never even tested the up. Like, do you like just, I'm zooming in here. Look at that. There is literally no wick. Like, do you see that? Like, you see that there's a wick here? There is literally no wick, right? It's just like downside, right? Like, it's just, it gaps down and then just goes lower. Now, certainly there were retracements within the day if you zoom in, if you traded it live. But, I mean, Jesus, excuse my French, like, this is ugly, right? And so you would imagine the chances that we break 3,800 are like upwards of 97% or something like that, right? I mean, ultimately the weekly cycle decline continues, and more to the point, the daily cycle decline is certainly underway. So day 14 was the top, right? And so the daily cycle is declining. And that is really just a reflection of the weekly cycle that's declining. So it's week 15. I mean, look at this. This was last week we poked up, made almost no progress. We consolidated. So this didn't have to end poorly, right? We could have consolidated here and then made a move higher. Instead, we tried. You can see this upper wick on the weekly. So this is a weekly chart here. We tried, and then we just, once we fell below this level here, 40.74, I mean, we just melted through supports. And again, you would expect we're going to make a new low below here because, as I've been pointing out in previous videos, you can look in the description for the earlier sort of the videos. This is a huge down leg, right? Like this huge leg down. And now we're making a lower high. Now, this line here was the idea that, if we're gonna get a lower high, that's the highest you might expect us to get, right? And it certainly seemed like we were setting up for that. And if anything, with the FOMC meeting happening next Wednesday, that was certainly the expectation. And who knows? I mean, think about the crazy reversal you would need next week to get up to here, let's say, by the FOMC meeting on Wednesday. I mean, it could happen. That would be a lot of upside. It would be an amazing trade because so many people would be on the wrong side of the trade. I mean, look how bearish this is. I mean, look at this close. Imagine if we opened like right here next week. That would be kind of crazy. Like, that would be the kind of thing where, you'd have to sort of choose your levels closely, obviously. But there could be a lot of upside to get that move to 4,300. That said, more likely we're going to get a flush lower to that like 3,700 area, maybe at first before maybe a bounce. And if you look at the monthly chart, again, it's telling you the same thing. My God, look at this ugly candle for May. Just a disgusting doji. And now we're going to make a new low. We're going to come below this 37.17 level, I suspect. And we maybe get a bounce. And then we probably end our journey around this 3,200 level in like late summer. But that's a scenario, not a prediction, and it's something that we just have to kind of watch and see if things start to play out that way. Oh, the last thing I'll say is if we look at the quarterly chart, right? So we start to look at longer time frames. This is the quarter we're in, right? Second quarter, right? It closes out at the end of this month, right? So the end of June is the end of Q2. And right now we're below the previous quarter's low. So we're below Q1's low. That's not a good sign, right? And there's clearly more downward pressure. And just to be clear, I'll just put these back on. It's week 15. These weekly cycles tend to be in the 20-ish week range. So we have at least another 5 weeks of downside is the way I would think about it, at least, right? That's just assuming it's 20 weeks. You can see the last one was 20 weeks. The one before that, 31, 24, 27, 26, 18, 23, 27, 21, 25, 21, 21, 19, 23, 21, 29. So we could have quite a bit of downside. Again, just watching the price action. We had this big leg down. We just now made a lower high. Again, I expected we got a little bit more juice because as it works out, the more of a lower high you get, the more extension you can get to the downside. So maybe, if anything, this maybe gets a little bit more contained. So we don't, maybe we don't find ourselves down at 3,200, sort of at the bottom. But I think we certainly at this point are going to be, touching the 3,700 area and maybe, a bit below that, if anything. And so that's SPX. QQQ, which is much weaker. Same idea, though. So it's day 20. So still, another maybe 10 trading days of downside to the daily cycle. And on the weekly level, we're only on week 12. I mean, God, wow. Again, thinking about the fact that these weekly cycles for QQQ are actually about the same length as the S&P ones, right? And we're only on week 12 for QQQ, whereas S&P is on week 15. Now, it's totally possible that they'll just bottom on the same week anyway. And so it's hard to know if that means the Qs will just have a really early bottom or it's the other way around. But the point is, this is week 12, same pattern. We made a low below here, big bearish bar. You expect we're going to, visit below 280. So another 8 points of downside at least. Maybe we get a bounce there. Tries to kind of rally. And then I could see us, yeah, I mean, at least in the 260 area, if not lower. I mean, that actually gets you back to the idea of like somewhere around the pre-COVID top of 237. So in the 240 range, right? So like maybe another 40, 50 points lower from here on the Qs. That would make sense. And it's the same patterns on the monthly. Again, keeping in mind, this was a major, well, that's interesting, right? So for the Qs, it doesn't look as dramatic, the downside. But this is 20 months from this, of this massive rally. If we think about a 3-year cycle, this could be our top, and this is only month 27. So we could be talking about a protracted, decline, which would happen in layers, right? There would be bounces, there would be weekly cycles that would even maybe you get one weekly cycle that's right translated. I'm not sure. I have to think about that. But certainly the idea is downside awaits. And finally, IWM, which is actually the strongest of all three, but I mean, it's clearly being dragged down at this point. I mean, look at that. Same idea. They all look very identical. Although in the case of IWM, notice it had a gap down opening, but it did try to recover, right? Remember, SPX did not even a whimper, right? So IWM still kind of kicking a little bit. So I would expect we would try to at least rally around the 175 area, something like that, right? But I would expect this is going to get pulled down like everything else. And, again, we have a top on month 20 from that major cycle low. I mean, you can see this is a furious rally here, right? This huge move. And then we just kind of rolled over, right? It's a rounding top. And so you could easily see us coming back to like the 150 area easily. That's a scenario, again, not a prediction, knowing that's week 15, or actually wait. Right, knowing it's week 15 of a new weekly cycle. And this weekly cycle has already failed, right? Because this low is below this low here from this previous weekly cycle, which is a fail of this one, right? So just not looking great.